You're telling me humans classify their own homeworld as a death world? Ambassador Kizilk's antennae twitched in disbelief, causing ripples in his ceremonial drink. That's just not possible. Your species made it to space. Sarah Chen, Earth's representative to the Galactic Council, couldn't help but smirk. After 3 years of diplomatic service, she'd grown accustomed to these reactions. Oh, it absolutely is. Category 12 on the standard scale. Though we think that classification might be a bit low, honestly. The ambassador's 4 eyes blinked in rapid succession, a sign of extreme distress among the Vexthari. But you're so fragile looking. No natural armor, no venom glands, not even basic radiation resistance. How did you even survive long enough to develop sentience? Spite, mostly, Sarah replied, taking a sip of her own drink. Actual Earth coffee, a luxury she'd insisted on having shipped to this remote station. That, and we're really good at turning literally anything into a tool or weapon. Did you know we originally domesticated wolves, Class 3 apex predators, by basically annoying them into submission over several thousand years? What? Kazilk's translator crackled as it struggled to process the concept. Oh yeah, we basically followed them around until they got tired of trying to eat us and decided we might be useful to keep around instead. We called it persistence hunting. Still do it sometimes for fun. The ambassador's carapace took on a distinctly greener hue. For fun? Mm-hmm. Though these days we usually just run marathons instead. You know, casual 42-kilometer jogs. Great way to spend a weekend. Before Kazilk could process this new horror, the station's emergency alert system activated with a shrill whine. Red warning lights began pulsing along the corridors of the diplomatic section. Attention all personnel. Hostile vessels detected. Classification: Zithtak Battle Fleet. This is not a drill. All diplomatic staff please proceed to designated shelter areas. Sarah's expression shifted from amused to focused in an instant. The Zithtak were notorious pirates, evolved from pack-hunting carnivores on another death world. They were one of the few species that could rival humans in terms of physical endurance and adaptability, though they tended to rely more on brute force than innovation. Well, she said, standing up and straightening her uniform jacket, looks like we're about to have some unwelcome guests. Ambassador, I suggest you head to the shelters. I need to coordinate with our defense forces. Kazilk's antennae were now practically vibrating with anxiety. But the station's automated defenses won't be enough. The Zithtak have probably already figured out how to bypass them. They're clever like that, almost as annoying as we are. Sarah was already pulling up tactical displays on her neural interface, the augmented reality overlays filling her vision with threat assessments and station schematics. Then we're doomed! The nearest response fleet is 3 days away! Sarah's grin returned, but there was something predatory about it now. Oh, I wouldn't say that. You see, Ambassador, there's something that Zithtak don't know about this station. Something that's not in any official records. What? What do you mean? Well, about 6 months ago, when we were reviewing the station's security protocols, we noticed some interesting structural features in the maintenance tunnels. Did you know they're almost exactly the right size for human maintenance crews to move through, and that they connect to every major system junction in the station? Kazilk's mandibles clicked in confusion. But we don't have human maintenance crews stationed here. No, Sarah agreed, her smile widening. But we do have a platoon of human Space Force Marines who've been very bored and very creative with their training exercises. Speaking of which, she tapped her neural interface, opening a secure channel. Lieutenant Rodriguez, remember all those maintenance drills you've been running? Time to put them to use. We've got some fellow Deathworlders coming to visit, and I think they could use a lesson in human hospitality. The response came back immediately, accompanied by the sounds of equipment being gathered and weapons being checked. Copy that, Ambassador. We've been hoping for a chance to test out those gravity manipulation tricks you suggested. Think they'll appreciate the welcome party? Oh, I'm sure they will. Especially the part where we demonstrate why humans are particularly good at fighting in 3-dimensional space. Kazilk, you might want to head to the shelters now. Things are about to get interesting. The ambassador didn't need to be told twice. As he scurried away, Sarah could hear him muttering something about how he should have requested assignment to a nice, peaceful sector of space, preferably one without any Deathworlders at all. Sarah turned her attention back to the tactical displays, watching as red dots representing Zithtak boarding pods began approaching the station. They were following predictable patterns, aiming for the main airlocks and cargo bays, exactly as expected. They had no idea that the station's seemingly primitive design was actually an elaborate trap, purpose-built by human engineers who'd spent centuries perfecting the art of turning spacecraft into impromptu fortress mazes. Rodriguez, are your people in position? Yes, ma'am. Teams are spread through the maintenance network, gravity controls are ready to be overridden on your mark, and we've got some special surprises waiting in the cargo bays. Permission to get creative? Granted. Just try to keep the structural damage to a minimum this time. And Rodriguez, make sure to record everything. The Galactic Council never believes our after-action reports without video evidence. Will do, ma'am. Though I still think they're just jealous they didn't think of using artificial gravity as a weapon first. Sarah chuckled as she made her way to the station's command center. Probably, but that's what they get for underestimating species from Deathworlds. Ready to show these pirates why picking a fight with one Deathworld species is bad enough, but picking a fight with one that's had time to get bored and innovative is even worse? Born ready, Ambassador. Born ready. The first Zithtok boarding pod attached to the station with a resonating clang. Sarah watched through the security feeds as the pirates, covered in natural armor and bristling with weapons, began cutting through the airlock. They moved with the confident precision of experienced predators, completely unaware that they were about to experience what happened when humans decided to get creative with artificial gravity, maintenance tunnels, and several months of pent-up energy. Station Command, this is Ambassador Chen. Initiate Security Protocol Delta 74, Authorization Code Theta 9 Echo 3, and please make sure the medical bay is prepped. Our guests are about to learn why humans have a reputation for turning anything, including space stations, into impromptu jungle gyms. The command staff, a mix of various species who'd worked with humans long enough to know better than to question their methods, acknowledged the order. Several of them were already pulling up betting pools on how long it would take the pirates to surrender. As the first group of Zithtok warriors entered the station, Sarah allowed herself a moment of professional pride. It had taken months to convince the station's designers to implement her suggested modifications, but now it was about to pay off spectacularly. The pirates were about to learn an important lesson about the difference between species that evolved on Deathworlds and species that evolved on Deathworlds and then spent thousands of years figuring out how to turn absolutely anything into an advantage. The station's artificial gravity shifted suddenly, sending the first wave of pirates tumbling into a carefully prepared kill box. Before they could recover, panels in the walls slid open, revealing marine fire teams who'd been waiting in the maintenance tunnels. The sounds of chaos, confusion, and rapidly changing gravity fields began echoing through the station's corridors. Sarah opened a general broadcast channel, making sure it would reach the Zithtok ships still approaching the station. Attention unauthorized vessels. This is Ambassador Sarah Chen of the Human Space Force. I should inform you that you are currently attempting to board a station that has been serving as a training ground for very bored, very creative human marines for the past 6 months. I suggest you consider your next actions carefully. There was a long pause before a gravelly voice responded in heavily accented Standard Galactic. You lie. Our intel shows minimal security forces on this station. Oh, that's technically true. We don't have many security forces here. What we do have is a platoon of Marines who've spent months turning this entire station into what they like to call an enhanced training environment. Would you like a demonstration? As if on cue, the gravity in Section 7 inverted, sending a group of Zithtok warriors tumbling into a net of sticky foam that Rodriguez's team had apparently installed in the ceiling at some point. Sarah made a mental note to ask when they'd had time to set that up. You see, she continued, keeping her voice pleasant and professional, humans have this interesting tendency to get creative when we're bored. And while your species might be from a death world too, you never quite developed our talent for turning absolutely anything into an improvised weapon, including, as you're about to learn, entire space stations. The sounds of chaos were spreading through the station now, punctuated by the occasional surprised roar from a Zithtok warrior discovering yet another of the Marines' improvements to the station's architecture. Sarah could hear Rodriguez's team having the time of their lives, calling out scores as they triggered various traps and gravity shifts. I'm going to make you a one-time offer, Sarah said, watching as another group of pirates found themselves caught in a corridor where the gravity was shifting between floors, walls, and ceiling in a nauseating pattern. Withdraw now, and we'll let you leave with a valuable lesson about the importance of thorough intelligence gathering. Stay, and you'll get to experience firsthand why humans are the only species in known space who consider parkour a reasonable combat technique. There was another long pause, broken only by the increasingly desperate reports from the boarding parties. Finally, the Zithtok commander responded, their voice carrying a note of grudging respect. Your species is insane. We prefer to think of it as adaptable, though I suppose from certain perspectives there might not be much difference. Now about that withdrawal offer. The pirate fleet began pulling back almost immediately, leaving behind their thoroughly humiliated boarding parties to be rounded up by Marines who were clearly having far too much fun with their gravity-defying combat techniques. Hours later, after the last of the pirates had been secured and the station had been returned to its normal configuration, Sarah found herself back in the diplomatic lounge with Ambassador Kazilk, who had emerged from the shelters looking simultaneously terrified and fascinated. I must admit," the ambassador said, his antennae still twitching nervously. "I'm having to reassess many of my assumptions about your species." Sarah smiled as she sipped her coffee, watching the maintenance crews, actual maintenance crews this time, begin repairing the minimal damage from the brief conflict. That happens a lot, though I should mention that this was actually a relatively tame example of human innovation. Wait until I tell you about the time we repelled an invasion by weaponizing our planet's weather control system. Kazilk's carapace paled noticeably. Perhaps another time, though I do have one question, if you'll permit it. Of course. Your Marines, they seem to be enjoying themselves entirely too much during the combat. Is that normal? Sarah couldn't help but laugh. Oh, Ambassador, that's not even close to the strangest thing humans do for fun. Have you heard about our extreme sports yet? There's this thing called base jumping that I think you'll find particularly interesting. The ambassador's drink rippled again as his antennae drooped in resignation. He was beginning to understand why humans had such a unique reputation in galactic society. Any species that could turn a diplomatic station into a combat obstacle course, and consider it fun, clearly operated on a very different level of sanity than most. As if reading his thoughts, Sarah grinned and raised her coffee cup in a toast. To Deathworlders, Ambassador. May we always keep the galaxy guessing. Kazilk raised his own drink with only mild hesitation. To Deathworlders, he agreed, then added under his breath, though perhaps not too many of them in one place at once. Sarah pretended not to hear that last part. After all, she still hadn't told him about the orbital skydiving competition the Marines were planning for next month's cultural exchange event. Some things, she decided, were better left as surprises. In the maintenance tunnels below, Lieutenant Rodriguez's team was already discussing improvements to their training course. After all, you never knew when another group of overconfident pirates might need a lesson in why challenging bored humans was generally a bad idea. The galaxy, Sarah reflected, was about to get a lot more interesting, and humans, as always, would be right in the middle of it, turning everything they could reach into either a tool, a weapon, or, more often than not, both at once. So let me get this straight, Captain Vishtak growled, their scales shifting from deep blue to an agitated purple. Not only did your raid fail, but the humans turned our own boarding tactics against us using maintenance tunnels and artificial gravity? The tactical officer's report had been playing on repeat in the Zithtak flagship's command center for the past hour, each viewing making it seem more implausible than the last. The footage showed Zithtak warriors, renowned across 3 sectors for their combat prowess, being systematically dismantled by what appeared to be humans treating warfare like an elaborate gymnastics routine. Yes, Captain, the tactical officer replied, their own scales a muted gray of embarrassment. And they seem to be keeping score. The captain's translator crackled as they released a string of untranslatable expletives. Keeping score. Of course they were keeping score, because apparently humans think combat is some sort of game. To be fair, sir, they were very efficient about it. Before the captain could respond, the ship's communications officer interrupted. Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the station. It's an invitation? An invitation to what? Vishtak demanded, already dreading the answer. According to this, the human Space Force is organizing an interspecies combat training exhibition next month. They're specifically inviting our crews to participate, citing our impressive adaptability and potential for learning new tactical approaches. The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. The humans weren't just defeating them. They were treating the entire incident as a learning opportunity. Back on the station, Sarah Chen was reviewing the after-action reports with a satisfaction that bordered on smugness. The Marines had outdone themselves, turning what could have been a serious security breach into what was essentially a very elaborate training exercise. Ambassador, Lieutenant Rodriguez's voice came through her neural interface. You might want to see this. We've been analyzing the Zithtak combat footage, and, well, they've got potential. Sarah raised an eyebrow. Potential for what exactly? Their natural agility, combined with their pack hunting instincts, they're actually pretty close to figuring out some of our zero-G combat techniques. They just never had a reason to think about fighting in 3 dimensions before. With some training. Lieutenant, are you suggesting what I think you're suggesting? Well, ma'am, we are supposed to be improving interspecies relations, and the Marines have been talking about wanting to set up a proper combat gymnastics league. Sarah couldn't help but laugh. Only humans would look at a pirate raid and see an opportunity for cultural exchange through competitive combat sports. Then again, it wouldn't be the first time humanity had turned enemies into allies through sheer force of weird. Draft a proper proposal, she told Rodriguez. But maybe let's call it something more diplomatic than combat gymnastics. The council gets nervous when we use words like that. Already on it, ma'am. We're thinking Advanced Microgravity Tactical Movement Exhibition. Sounds official enough to get funding, but still lets us bounce pirates off the walls. Meanwhile, in the diplomatic sector, Ambassador Kazilk was holding an emergency meeting with representatives from various species, all trying to process what they'd just witnessed. The humans did what? The delegates' crystalline form vibrated with disbelief. They turned the entire station into what they called a tactical playground, Kazilk explained, his antennae still twitching from the memory. And now they want to make it a regular event. Something about promoting interspecies understanding through shared athletic pursuits. Athletic pursuits? These crystal facets flickered in confusion. They consider combat an athletic pursuit? Humans consider everything an athletic pursuit, Kazilk sighed. Last week they organized a race through the station's external maintenance tubes, in vacuum, for fun. The delegates exchanged worried looks. The galaxy had barely adjusted to having one species of Deathworlders around. The idea of humans actually teaching their combat techniques to others was concerning. Sarah's next meeting was with the station's engineering team, who had their own interesting perspective on recent events. Actually, Ambassador, the chief engineer, a human named Patel, was saying, the Marines' modifications have given us some fascinating ideas for improving station security. We're thinking of implementing some of their gravity manipulation sequences into the standard defense protocols. The Council will love that, Sarah muttered. Any other improvements I should know about? Well, Patel grinned, pulling up a holographic display. We've been looking at the maintenance tunnel network, and we think we can optimize it for what Rodriguez's team calls tactical traversal. Maybe add some variable gravity sections, a few drop shafts. You want to turn the entire station into a permanent obstacle course. Think of it as a dual-purpose security and physical training system, Patel suggested. Plus, it'll give the Marines something to do besides reorganizing the armory for the 100th time. Sarah considered this. On one hand, the Council would have a fit if they knew humans were essentially turning a diplomatic station into a giant combat gymnasium. On the other hand, it had proven surprisingly effective at deterring pirates. Draw up the plans, she decided. But let's call it an enhanced emergency response system in the official documentation. Back in the Tzithtak fleet, Captain Vishtak was facing a minor mutiny. Several of their younger warriors, instead of being demoralized by their defeat, were actively campaigning to accept the humans' training invitation. But Captain, one particularly enthusiastic officer argued, think about it. They turned artificial gravity into a weapon. Who does that? We have to learn how they think. That's exactly what worries me, Vishtak grumbled. Understanding how humans think might be hazardous to our sanity. Nevertheless, the captain found themselves drafting a response to the invitation. After all, if humans were going to keep turning everything into an improvised combat arena, it might be better to learn their methods than face them unprepared. A week later, Sarah was preparing for a video conference with the Galactic Council, trying to figure out how to explain that the station's recent security upgrade included turning several sectors into what the Marines were now calling tactical parkour zones. Just tell them it's a new approach to integrated defense systems, Rodriguez suggested, helping her prepare the presentation. They love it when we use big words to describe simple concepts. Simple concepts like using artificial gravity to turn pirates into unwilling acrobats? Exactly, though I still say we should show them the highlight reel, especially the part where Team 3 used the cargo bay's magnetic systems to— Let's save that for the training seminars, Sarah interrupted. Speaking of which, how many species have signed up for the exhibition so far? 7, surprisingly. Turns out we're not the only ones who get bored on long space deployments. The Tzithtak are sending 3 teams, and even the Vexthari have expressed interest. though they want to modify the courses for their exoskeletal structures. Sarah smiled. Sometimes she wondered if humanity's greatest contribution to galactic society wasn't their technology or their resilience, but their ability to turn absolutely anything, even pirate raids, into an opportunity for what they cheerfully called cultural exchange through controlled chaos. As if to prove her point, her neural interface pinged with a message from the station's recreation department. They were requesting permission to install what they called variable gravity recreation zones in several public areas, citing increased interest in human-style physical training among the diplomatic staff. "You know," she told Rodriguez, "when I took this posting, I thought I'd be preventing wars through traditional diplomacy. Instead, I'm apparently running the galaxy's first combination embassy gymnasium combat school." "That's the human way, isn't it?" Rodriguez grinned. "Why solve problems normally when you can solve them creatively? Besides, I bet this is the first diplomatic station in history where the pirates actually make appointments before showing up." She wasn't entirely wrong. The Tzith-Tak had already submitted official requests for security system testing exercises, their diplomatic way of asking for rematch matches against the Marines. In her private quarters that evening, Sarah added another entry to her personal log. Day 847 of diplomatic posting. Successfully prevented interstellar incident by turning attempted piracy into impromptu athletic competition. Currently organizing Galaxy's first microgravity combat sports league. Beginning to suspect entire diplomatic career will consist of explaining why humans think everything can be improved by adding parkour. Note to self: request additional funding for diplomatic exercise equipment. Also, remind Marines that betting pools on official training exercises must be kept off public channels, no matter how impressive the odds are. Additional note: maybe humanity's real superpower isn't our endurance or adaptability, but our ability to make friends by thoroughly confusing everyone around us until they give up and join in. Final note: still haven't told Council about planned orbital skydiving exhibition. Saving that surprise for next quarter's budget meeting. As she finished her log entry, Sarah could hear the distant sounds of Marines training with their new Tzith-Tak partners in one of the tactical exercise zones. From the enthusiastic shouting, it seemed both species had discovered a shared appreciation for what humans called the art of creative combat. The galaxy, she reflected, was about to get a lot more interesting, and somehow humanity had once again managed to turn potential enemies into allies through their unique combination of combat prowess, relentless creativity, and what other species were beginning to recognize as their most dangerous trait: the ability to make absolutely anything into a competitive sport. Just another day in the life of a human diplomat, making the galaxy a safer place, one confused alien species at a time. The Galactic Council's quarterly review meeting was proceeding exactly as Sarah Chen had expected, with equal parts fascination and horror. "Ambassador Chen," Council member Zixtal began, their bioluminescent patches pulsing with barely contained agitation. "Please explain why your station's latest budget request includes funding for something called Diplomatic Mobility Enhancement Infrastructure." Sarah maintained her most professional diplomatic expression. "Of course, Council member. As you're aware, recent events demonstrated certain vulnerabilities in our standard security protocols. We've developed an innovative approach to station defense that simultaneously promotes interspecies cooperation and physical readiness." "You mean the combat gymnastics tournament?" another council member interjected flatly. "The Advanced Microgravity Tactical Movement Exhibition," Sarah corrected smoothly, "which, I might add, has already resulted in a 73% decrease in unauthorized boarding attempts and a 200% increase in formal diplomatic exchanges with previously hostile species." The council chamber erupted in a cacophony of translated arguments. Sarah used the moment to sip her coffee, mentally calculating how long it would take them to realize that humanity had, once again, solved an interstellar security crisis by turning it into a competitive sport. Meanwhile, in what was officially designated as Training Zone Alpha, but which the Marines insisted on calling the Gravity Gauntlet, Lieutenant Rodriguez was conducting what the paperwork described as a joint tactical readiness exercise. No, you're thinking too linearly," she explained to a frustrated Tzith-Tak warrior. "The gravity's going to shift to the left wall in 3 seconds. You need to be ready to use that momentum to reach the target zone." The Tzith-Tak, whose name was Kurix, flicked their tail in annoyance. "In normal combat, gravity stays in one direction." "The what?" "Never mind. Human cultural reference. Now watch this demonstration again." Back in the council chamber, Sarah was patiently explaining why the station needed to requisition additional rapid environmental reconfiguration systems. These modifications, she elaborated, will allow us to simulate a variety of tactical scenarios while promoting understanding between species. For instance, did you know that the Tzithtak have already adapted several of their traditional hunting techniques for zero-gravity environments? Their latest exhibition match drew diplomatic observers from 12 different sectors. Ambassador, Council member Zixtal interrupted. Are you suggesting that we officially sanction turning a diplomatic station into an obstacle course? An adaptive security training facility, Sarah corrected, which has, coincidentally, become our most effective tool for conflict resolution. It's remarkable how many interspecies disputes can be settled through supervised competitive exercises. In the station's newly renovated cargo bay, now officially designated as Diplomatic Athletic Exchange Zone C, a rather unusual cultural exchange was taking place. You mean humans invented this activity deliberately? A Vexthari diplomat asked, watching as a mixed team of humans and Tzithtak demonstrated what they called a zero-G relay race. Oh yes, Ambassador Kazilk explained, his antennae twitching with a mixture of resignation and amusement. Apparently they needed something to do during long space deployments, and this was somehow the logical solution. But why are they playing that music? They claim it enhances performance. I've learned not to question human training methodologies too deeply. The music in question, Danger Zone from something humans called Top Gun, echoed through the bay as teams navigated an increasingly complex series of gravity-shifting obstacles. In her office, Sarah was reviewing the latest station statistics with a sense of satisfaction. Diplomatic incidents were down 60%, while formal requests for joint training sessions had increased exponentially. The station's reputation had shifted from remote diplomatic outpost to premier center for innovative security practices in less than 3 months. Her neural interface pinged with a message from Rodriguez. Ambassador, you might want to come see this. The Tzithtak just challenged the Vexthari to something they're calling tactical tag. They've even adapted their natural camouflage for zero-G stealth maneuvers. Sarah smiled. The galaxy was adapting to human influences faster than anyone had anticipated. Even the traditionally cautious Vexthari were installing gravity manipulation systems in their diplomatic vessels, claiming it was purely for defensive purposes. Lieutenant, she replied, please remind all participants that betting pools must be registered with station administration for proper oversight, and make sure someone's recording this for the Council's cultural exchange archives. The response came back immediately. Already on it. Though you might want to know that the Nexthi have submitted a formal request to join next month's exhibition. They're designing special crystalline exoframes for microgravity maneuvering. The Galactic Council's Security Committee was going to have a collective meltdown when they learned that crystal-based hive-mind entities were now participating in what was essentially extreme sports in space. Sarah made a mental note to prepare an extra detailed presentation on innovative approaches to interspecies confidence-building exercises. In the station's main diplomatic lounge, now featuring variable gravity sections at the request of multiple species representatives, Captain Vishtak was engaged in what diplomatic records would describe as informal security discussions with several other species' military attachés. The humans, they explained, gesturing with a beverage specifically designed for zero-G consumption, don't just adapt to challenges. They actively seek them out, then turn them into training exercises, then into competitions, and somehow end up creating entirely new forms of diplomatic interaction in the process. Is that why your fleet now includes dedicated tactical athletics officers? A Nexthi representative inquired, their crystalline form refracting the lounge's ambient lighting. Standard procedure now, Vishtak confirmed. After the third time human Marines challenged us to what they called capture the flag in variable gravity, we realized we needed specialists. Sarah's next report to Earth's diplomatic corps was succinct. Traditional diplomatic protocols have been successfully modified to accommodate local conditions and species-specific characteristics. Station now operates as combination embassy, training facility, and what humans would recognize as a parkour gymnasium in space. Request permission to expand program to other diplomatic installations. Also requesting additional funding for what the Marines are calling extreme diplomatic engagement equipment. The response from Earth was equally brief. Permission granted. Funding approved. Please ensure all new diplomatic obstacles courses meet safety regulations and include proper warning signs in at least 15 languages. Also, remind staff that orbital skydiving must remain an optional activity during cultural exchange events. In Training Zone Alpha, Rodriguez was introducing a group of newly arrived diplomatic security teams to what humans called the basics of three-dimensional combat maneuvering. The key, she explained, demonstrating a complex sequence of movements that utilized shifting gravity fields, is to stop thinking of up and down as absolute concepts. In space, these are more like suggestions than rules. A Tzithtak instructor, now officially attached to the station's training staff, added, "Think of it like hunting in a forest, where the trees keep moving and gravity changes direction every few seconds. Simple, yes?" The look of horror on the new arrivals' faces suggested they didn't find it simple at all. Sarah's personal log entry that evening reflected the station's evolving situation. Day 923 of diplomatic posting. Station officially recognized as Center for Innovative Security Practices and Interspecies Athletic Cooperation. Galactic Council still unsure whether to be impressed or terrified. Marines have started offering certification courses in what they're calling diplomatic parkour. 3 more species have requested permanent training attaches. Note to self: need to update station's official description in diplomatic registry. Current remote diplomatic outpost designation no longer accurate. Considering Center for Advanced Interspecies Tactical Diplomacy, though Marines suggest Space Ninja Academy would be more accurate. Additional note: Tzithtak pirates now scheduling raids in advance to ensure proper training staff availability. May need to start charging admission. Final note: humanity's diplomatic revolution continues apace. Who knew that the secret to galactic peace was turning everything into an extreme sport? As she finished her log entry, the station's public address system announced the beginning of what was officially listed as Intermediate Microgravity Diplomatic Exchange Exercise Alpha, but which everyone knew was actually the finals of the station's first officially sanctioned Zero-G Obstacle Course Championship. Sarah checked her schedule and smiled. She had a meeting with the Galactic Council's Cultural Exchange Committee in an hour, where she would explain why the station needed to install what the engineers called variable gravity recreation zones in all major diplomatic areas. The presentation would include video footage of last week's joint human Tzithtak demonstration of tactical acrobatics as a conflict resolution technique. The galaxy, she reflected, was still adjusting to humanity's unique approach to diplomacy. But given that the station's combat sports disguised as diplomatic training program had already prevented 3 potential interstellar conflicts and 2 trade disputes, it was hard to argue with the results. Just another day in the life of a human diplomat, teaching the galaxy that sometimes the best way to prevent a war is to turn it into a competition instead.